Before we get into a detailed analysis of just how we built ourselves an enemy, as you put it yourself, I would like to pose the question to you of just a little bit about what the Soviet Union is doing today, and then we'll go and see how it got there. And that is, what is this all about, these 8 failures of our space program? Was it sabotage? What happened to the Challenger? What details do you have on this?
Yes. Well, there were 8 American failures, but there were also 3 French. The Ariadne rocket, the French rocket, they also had 3 failures in a row. Statistically, that succession of failures would come about, knowing what we do about the reliability of these rockets. Statistically, you're looking at 1 in 250 million. Now, if you want to believe that 1 in 250 million chance is acceptable, then go ahead. I believe fully, and I wrote within a week of Challenger going down, that this was clearly sabotage. That's one point. Statistically, quite clear it was sabotage. The second point is that, as you know, the Soviets always monitor from so-called fishing vessels, which are actually electronic espionage vessels. They monitor the launching from Cape Canaveral. They have these vessels offshore, which monitor the radio communications. About 2 hours before Challenger left the launch pad, the Soviet vessels took off at flank speed. They left the launch area. The first time they've ever done this. So that's subsidiary evidence that the Soviets knew that Challenger, the launch, was going to be a failure. So you've got 1, the statistical probability, 2, the fact that the Soviet monitoring vessels left the area about 2-3 hours before the launch, and thirdly, I understand from sources the KGB had a big party in Moscow that same night. So those 3 points. I've got 10 other points I could probably make, but...
Well, if the Soviets did do this, how precisely did they do it?
Well, they have a variety of methods. You can take... let me give, without saying the probabilities of each method, let me give some of the ways in which they could have brought about this. First of all, as we might get into later, we know the Soviets using the Tesla techniques for modifying the jet stream, for modifying weather. They had been modifying the weather, we suspect, to the extent that particularly cold weather came down over Florida at the time of the Challenger launch. What does this mean? It has an effect on the solid fuel itself, and you always get a problem of vibrations in these types of launches. And there is a possibility that the cold air created perhaps an unstoppable vibration, and these vehicles are really, they look tremendous, they look strong, but actually they're very susceptible to structural failure. And given a certain amount of vibration, there's no question these vehicles will fail. So you've got one possibility, the alteration of the jet stream through Tesla techniques, plus their knowledge of vibration. Secondly, they could use laser weapons from offshore. They could even use perhaps as something as innocent as a .303 rifle shell, which would penetrate by the O-rings, and then I think the video shows a little puff of smoke coming out of the O-ring, and then the whole rocket blew apart beginning at that point. So there's a variety of techniques they could have used. I don't know which they used, but I'm quite sure they did use one of them.
From inside of NASA?
Or outside of NASA.
Either way.
Either way. It could be inside or outside. My guess, and it's only a guess, it could have been in combination because about 6 months before the Challenger blew up, and the series of explosions began the previous August. So before even the previous August explosion, the captain, I forget his name, but who was in charge of training all recovery officers on the test ranges, defected to the Soviet Union. That man knew the failures of every one of our rockets. He could have told that to the Soviets. They would then know about the vibration weaknesses and structural weaknesses. So it could have been done from inside in that sense through a defector. It could have been done someone at Thiokol Company. I rather suspect outside or combination.